Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. My name is Professor Puleng Sakalo, and today we're going to be looking at selecting a methodology and research design, specifically looking at qualitative research. So we're going to start first with a bit of an overview on research paradigms leading to how do you then choose your research methodology? What are some of the things that you need to take into consideration when you choose your research methodology? I'm going to share my screen and then we can start with the session. Okay, so as I've indicated, today we're going to be focusing on selecting your methodology and research design, specifically looking at qualitative research. And today we're going to do part 1 of this session, and tomorrow we're going to continue with part 2 of the session. Okay, so let's start with a little bit of a comic to just get us ready for the session. This is one of those comics that you find online. So it's a student and their supervisor. And the supervisor asked the student, so how's your research? I'm running a little behind. Behind? How far behind? I can't see where I'm supposed to be, which is, I don't know. I'm running behind, figuring that out too. Maybe you need to run faster. But where am I running to? So this speaks to some of the things that you might go through as a student as you're figuring out the process of your dissertation or thesis journey, and you get to a point where you really feel stuck or you feel lost, and as a result you feel that you're not making any progress. So you were hoping that by this time you would have been at this level, but you're not there yet. So you're running behind, right? And you're feeling stuck, and you don't know where it is that you're supposed to be going. Where is this research going? Where do I want to get to with this research? So there are those moments that we would get to as students in our research journey, and that's okay. That's okay. It's important to reflect on that, have a conversation with your supervisor on that, and then you can get going. And it's through engaging. So don't disappear, because sometimes when students disappear, you don't want to engage with your supervisor because you have not done that which you said you were going to do, that you agreed on, and then you just disappear. Don't disappear. Engage with your supervisor, and maybe between the two of you, you can figure it out and find directions again to know and see where you are running to. All right, so that was just a teaser for us to start the session today. So when conducting research, we have paradigms, various paradigms that we think about when doing research. So what guides your research? How are you going to be approaching your research? Is going to be determined by how you also view the world, how you look at things. And this is, again, going to be based on perhaps the kind of discipline that you find you are in. So your academic discipline as well. So paradigm determines how you view the world. And how you view the world assists you in deciding what method to use for your research. Right? So all of these things, and because this speaks also to the kind of objectives that you will have, the questions that you would ask, or the hypothesis that you would have. So all of those, your curiosities, the questions that you have, they will assist you to be able to frame and decide on what method you're going to use. So what paradigm do you come with for the focus of your study? What you view as reality. What is it that you view as reality? What is it that is viewed as knowledge? And the truth will also guide the research that we do and how we're going to do that research. The method that you end up using, therefore, whether you use qualitative or quantitative, will be dependent on these paradigms. Okay, so these are the various ways in which we think about the world. Ontology. So when we talk about ontology, what are we talking about? Ontology is what we call the theory of existence, nature of reality. How do we understand reality? How do we understand the world, right? So the theory of existence, how we make meaning of the world in the world. So that is the ontology, right? And then epistemology is the theory of knowledge. When we're talking about epistemologies, epistemic justice, epistemic violence, it all speaks to the ways in which we come to know the world, we make meaning of the world, and also what we perceive as the nature of truth as it relates to the world. So when we're talking about, for example, the project of decolonization, which has been a buzzword for the past couple of years now, one of the main things around decolonization is that it challenges this idea of privileging Euro-Western epistemologies. And what that means is that knowledges, worldviews from the West, from Europe, have been privileged in terms of how we understand the world, in terms of how we theorize. Now, you may be based in Africa. So does it make sense, therefore, to only rely on Euro-Western epistemologies to make meaning of African realities? So this is what epistemology is about. So when you're thinking about epistemology, you need to think about your research and how you then think about the theory of knowledge, right? How do you think about how we make meaning and come to know and be in the world? That's epistemology. And then methodology, of course, then speaks to how we gain that knowledge about the world. So the method that you would use to be able to define, to make meaning, to make sense of the world. And that is at the heart, at the core of your own research, of your dissertation, of your thesis. The methodology that you're going to be using, is it linked to your objectives? Is it going to assist you to achieve your objectives? Is it going to assist you to answer your research question? So choosing the correct methodology is very critical in research. And today we're going to be specifically looking at qualitative method. However, just a bit of an overview in terms of the paradigms and various methods within research more broadly. So there are two paradigms, or a number of paradigms rather, that have been in existence in looking at the ways in which we come to know the world. And the first one, which is one of the very first paradigms that have been used in many of our disciplines, is the positivist paradigm. Now, when you're looking from a standpoint of the positivist paradigm, in all these different layers that I've just described, the idea of reality, when you think about reality and understanding and meaning of reality from a positivist paradigm, then you're thinking about what is real, what is fact, what is true, right? What is perceived as scientific in terms of how we look at reality. So here we would have people like your physicists, astrophysicists, astronauts, people who are interested in certainty, right? In certainty, in wanting to understand scientifically truth and facts and measurements. So, and that's how then one would get to understand reality. So that's the ontology. So that's how then those who see knowledge or being or understanding of the world, reality, as being described only from a certainty perspective, where we speak about what is real, right? And what is scientific? And of course, we can have conversations and debates around that. So if you're coming from a positivist paradigm, this is what you'd be thinking. And then knowledge, how we come to know reality and truth is what we're interested in. So they would explain, the positivists, they would explain events through knowable facts, right? So causes and effects, law-like underlying regularities, right? So this is the law, this is fact. This causes that. If this happens, it should lead to that. If it does not lead to that, then something is wrong. So very specific, very direct. So it's about the true findings, right? And it's about objective observation. So you're looking in from the outside, and you don't want anything to be tainted. You want objective reality, and it's about absolute knowledge. Okay, and then the methodology that would then go with positivist paradigm would be quantitative, because it's about measurements, it's about facts, it's about cause and effect. It's experimental, you're testing, you predict things, you control also, and then based on all of that, you can also then be able to generalize, right? The assumption is that what you do is generalizable because you've tested and it is fact and it is truth. So that is positivist paradigm. And then we've got constructivist or interpretivist paradigm. And here, the ways in which one would look at reality, would look at ontology, is that we understand that there's multiple subjective realities which are constructed and interpreted. So as I encounter you, you encounter me, I learn from you, you learn from me, events happen in the world. Those events contribute to the ways in which we see the world, right? So reality is constructed through human interactions. I affect you, you affect me. And then that determines or reshapes our reality. And so knowledge, epistemology, when it comes to constructivist paradigm, is that we understand events through interpretation. So how do you make meaning of what you've observed, what you've seen, your interaction? And all of these are influenced by your interactions with one another, but also with the social context. So the context also plays a critical role in terms of how one makes meaning of the world. And the methodologies that would then go hand in hand with this kind of a paradigm would be qualitative. It's about experiences, it's about meaning making, it's about the world that is constructed through interaction. And so we look at, for example, case studies, understanding and interpreting particular contexts. Are there similarities? Are there differences? What are the similarities or those differences? What role does context play in terms of how people make meaning of things, right? We do a study in South Africa, we do a study in Tanzania. Would the results be the same or not? The context and social context of a particular place would also determine the ways in which people engage and view the world. And then again, similar but going further with a constructivist paradigm, then we move also to what is called critical or emancipatory paradigm. And here reality is shaped by our history. When we speak about the importance of history, understanding the past, because that past informs the present and it also contributes towards the future. And the reality and understanding of reality is shaped by these historical events. It's shaped by the social circumstances, social events, social interactions. Reality is shaped by the political circumstances. So is there stability? Is there no stability? What happens when there's war, when there's conflict? How does or do all of these things shape the ways in which we come to be in the world, our reality. So if you were based in Sudan, for example, if you were based in a conflict-laden country, what would that mean to how you view the world and engage with the world? So the influence of politics, economic values, right? Cost of living, economic stability or instability, persons in society, the idea or issues of power, who's got power, who doesn't. All of these things combined shape reality. So when we look at understanding the world, then you look at it from a critical perspective to say, okay, we've got issues or challenges of unemployment in South Africa. Is it because people are lazy, they don't want to work? Is it because there are too many people and less jobs? What are the issues? So unemployment, and you link it to economic issues, and you link it to political issues, you link it to historical issues. So you don't just look at unemployment as just a phenomenon, but you look at it as a phenomenon shaped by all these historical, social, political, economic issues in society, issues of power in society. And therefore, you use a critical lens in how you understand the issue or challenge of unemployment within a country. And of course, it's about emancipation. How is your work emancipatory? How are you going to provide a renewed understanding through the research that you're going to conduct, so that we can think of your work as offering an understanding that is also emancipatory? So this is what then this paradigm is about, right? Assisting us in terms of knowledge production. So you said the issue is unemployment. So how do you then produce knowledge, create knowledge, do that master's or PhD focusing on issues of unemployment? At the end, the idea is for you to create or to produce or contribute towards knowledge and assisting us to understand events or understand unemployment in social and economic contexts, right? And also emphasizing the ideological critique and praxis. Right. So what are some of the structural issues? What are the historical issues? So it's not only at face value what's happening, what we see, but the ideology is also informing the realities on the ground. Right. So findings are value mediated, of course, and socially constructed in terms of how we understand and make meaning of why there is a challenge of high unemployment in a country like South Africa. And then how do you then do all of this? And this is where then methodology comes in. How do you do this? Of course, this is controversial. As I said, are you just going to look at unemployment from an economic perspective and the financial perspective, or are you going to also look at it as being informed by history, as being informed by oppressive regimes that created inequalities, and as a result of those inequalities, the effects of those are felt today in this current moment? So it's argumentative in that sense, in terms of how then you would do the work and think about the methodology and how you apply the methodology. And at the end, the aim of doing or drawing from a critical emancipatory paradigm is because you're interested in issues of social justice and emancipation, right? And how you would then do the work, or when you've collected your data, you would do or analyze your data using analysis like discourse analysis. So it's about understanding things from a historical perspective, is analyzing the discourses and how people speak about unemployment. So and understanding issues from a more broader structural level, going beyond what is being said, but also looking at the underlying meaning of the words that people are using. So it's important that the method also speaks to that emancipatory idea. And the approach that one who's interested in this kind of paradigm would use would be critical action research, for example, where you work in collaboration with the communities that you're interested in. So again, the type of data collection, the type of approach or design that you would use for your research would be in line with emancipatory ideas. So how you then engage with the communities, how you engage with your research collaborators would also be determined by how you approach your research. And feminism is an example of how one does this kind of research. Okay, so these are the paradigms that we have, right? And with these paradigms, there are pros and cons. And it's a long debate that has been there for many years. What is better? Is qualitative better? Is quantitative better? And the argument is that both actually have value, right? You don't decide to use qualitative method because that's what you prefer, that's what you like, or quantitative also because that's what you prefer. It's also determined by the kinds of questions that you ask. What is more valued? Both have got value. Both have got different strengths and weaknesses. You do a qualitative research, there are certain questions or layers that you cannot reach because you did qualitative, and the same with quantitative. So there are some strengths in terms of what you can get when you do a particular type of research, but there's also weaknesses as well in terms of what it means to only interview 10 or 20 people, and what does it mean to only ask closed questions and give people surveys and not really engage with them and get to hear about their experiences. So all of those, right? So they must be judged by their own criteria. Again, what is it that you want to achieve with your research? And as a result of this, saying, but how can we find a common ground? Sometimes just doing purely qualitative research is okay. Purely quantitative research is okay. But how do you then find a midpoint of these two to be able to be as broad as possible if that's what you want in the kind of research that you do? And this is how the development of the last paradigm came to be. And this is called pragmatism, right? And pragmatism is about looking at the usefulness of the method that you are choosing. Is it useful, and is it enough to answer what you want to have answered? And this is how the idea of mixed methods came about. So many researchers now draw from mixed methods where you can use both qualitative and quantitative methods in the same study. Depending on your research questions, some of the questions can be answered by qualitative, some by quantitative, or you can get a more broader, in-depth understanding of the phenomena that you're interested in by actually drawing from both. Okay, so in this way, then the two paradigms supplement each other. Okay, and you don't just do it because you think, okay, I'll be on the safe side if I do both, if I combine both and I do mixed method. Again, it has to be guided by what it is that you want to achieve. Okay, so just a quick summary on qualitative and quantitative. As we know, the qualitative research focuses on experience. So it's about the quality of experience. You're interested in the experience of people who are unemployed, maybe people who've been unemployed for the past 3 years. What are their challenges? What are their experiences? What are the things that they're battling with? All of that, right? So you're interested in the experience. Or you can do a quantitative study where you're looking at the quantity, how many people are there in South Africa who are unemployed? What does that mean in terms of the economy if we have so many people who are not productive in the economy, and not because they don't want to, but because of the challenges that are there, and the frequency, and also the magnitude of the problem. How big is it, and what are the implications of that for society? Right, so different questions for different methods. And then the philosophical roots is that with qualitative, as I've already said, it's constructivism, interpretivism, right? It's about the subjective experience. How does it feel for you to be unemployed? My experience of being unemployed might not necessarily be the same as the next person, because there are many variables that also contribute to the ways in which people experience something. You might have support, you might have supportive relationships in your life, you might have responsibilities. Someone might not have those responsibilities, or there might be lack of support, and therefore the ways in which people experience phenomena will be determined by all these different things. So hence, we're talking about the subjective experience as well. And then with quantitative, it's very positivistic. It's about finding facts. It's about certainty. It's about prediction. So if the unemployment rate in South Africa continues to increase, what are the possible future implications of this? Right? So you want to predict, you want to look at the challenge that we're having now and the possible implications in the future. All right. And the goal of qualitative is to understand. You want to understand phenomena. You want to describe. You want to find meaning on the challenges that are linked to the particular phenomena. And with quantitative, as I've indicated, you want to predict. And you want to control. So if you're predicting that if nothing is done now, these are the possible consequences that we might be facing going forward. So what is it that we can do in able to make sure that that does not happen? You want to control, you want to confirm something, or you want to test. Right? And then with descriptive characteristics of these paradigms is that with qualitative, it's flexible, it's evolving, it's emergent, because this is engagement. It's about constructing reality. So as you're busy with the research, as you're busy with the engagement with the people that you are conducting your research with alongside, there is flexibility, right? And things emerge as time goes. So as you've interviewed one person, you might find that maybe you want to do things a little differently with the next person without obviously going off script in terms of what your focus is. So it's emergent in that sense. Whereas that leeway is not really there when you're doing quantitative research. You cannot just change your survey just like that along the way or in the middle of giving the survey to a participant. So it's very structured, it's very predetermined, because you also don't want your results to be affected by the changes along the way. So your analysis and your findings also become very important in how you actually conduct and do the work. Whereas with qualitative, it's more open-ended and it allows for that, right? So there is evolving opportunity for evolving in the process. And then data collection, you as the researcher are an instrument. So you speak to your participants, you observe, you are the instrument for conducting the research. Whereas with quantitative, the instrument is external. The instrument is the survey that you're going to give. The instrument is the experiment that you're going to conduct. The test that you're going to give is the method that you would use to collect your data. Okay, so qualitative research What is it interested in? It's interested in the meanings, as I've said, the meanings of phenomena. It's interested in how people make meaning of their reality, make meaning of their lives, make meaning of their relationships, make meaning of where they find themselves in the world. And it's about lived experiences, right? So it's about my own lived experience on a particular issue. And that becomes very important when it comes to choosing your participants. Will those participants be able to assist you to answer your research question? So if you're interested in lived experiences of people who are unemployed, you will not go and interview people who are working, right? So the lived experiences that are linked to the particular question that you're asking. Or you're interested in perceptions. So it might not necessarily be people who've gone through that experience, who've had that experience, but because people don't live in isolation, people live in relationships, in relation to other people, they might have perceptions. It could be because I'm from a particular community, the cultures, the histories, the values inform the ways in which we view the world. So I might have perceptions when it comes to a particular issue in terms of what is it that people believe, what is it that people say, what is it that people often attribute to particular things. So that's where you would be looking at perceptions, right? And here we're looking at complexities of these meanings, these experiences. So if you're interested in issues of identity, for example, you might be interested in the complexities of identity. What are they? The contradictions, the multiplicity, that a person is a woman, is a sister, is a mother, is a manager, is a leader. So these multiplicity of identities, what do they mean in terms of how a person sees themselves and how they're seen by other people? And what are the contradictions of those as well? So expectations in terms of society, but also expectations in terms of how a person would like to present themselves in the world. So how does one deal with those contradictions when it comes to identity? And of course, the nuances of identity formation as well. So this is just an example. You can put anything else there. Doesn't have to be identity. So I'm just giving an example in terms of when you're looking at the meanings or the lived experiences, what are the complexities of the lived experiences of someone who's unemployed? What are the nuances, the little things linked to being an unemployed person? And what are the politics around that as well? Right? So politics of identity, and it could be gender identity, for example, and what are the complexities around that? So it's about qualitative research is about exploring of the social and cultural world around us and trying to make meaning of this world that we're inhabiting. And so what is qualitative research's view of the subject, right? So qualitative research asks, what is it exactly that qualitative researchers think they can do? Right? So as a qualitative researcher, if you're interested in qualitative research, what is it that you think you can do as a qualitative researcher with the work that you're doing, right? And what do we assume when we focus on individuals' perspectives, on people around us? When we look at the people's perspectives on a particular issue, people's point of view on a particular issue, people's lived experiences on a particular issue, what is it that we assume? We are assuming that people have got some knowledge, they have got some understanding, they have something that they can share that can assist us to be able to make meaning or to get to a better understanding of a particular phenomena. Many of the businesses, companies that sell a particular product. So let's say Mercedes-Benz, and there's a new car in the market. and you want to know whether people like this new car or not. So you might do a focus group, or you might invite people and talk to people, get their point of view on that new car that's in the market. So we call that market research, because you want to know whether, should you order more vehicles, or should something in the car be changed, or looking at people who've driven this car for the past 5 years, what are the things that they're happy about, not happy about. And you do this because you want to know going forward how you can do things differently, or whether what you are currently doing is working or not. So that's part of research. And in this particular case, it will be part of market research. So what is it that you assume when you invite people to come and speak about a particular product? You're assuming that they have an understanding of it. You're assuming that what they share with you will assist you to know what to do with that product. So these are some of the assumptions that researchers might come with, and that they would then want to test, right? And in qualitative research, at the center, at the core of it, it's about experience. And we give authority to experience, saying, you have lived this, you have an understanding of this, you have a memory of this. And as a result, you are better placed to be able to contribute towards our understanding, right, of whatever particular phenomena that you're looking at. And what is experience? Is experience pure? Is experience mediated? These are the questions that we need to ask ourselves. Can experience be pure? Experience is based on how you have engaged with something and how it has been meaningful or not meaningful for you. And what are the mediators? What are the things that mediate whether your experience was positive or negative? And if our narration, how we tell and retell and share our experiences, is always a retelling, then is our account true? And the question is, do we want it to be true? Are we in search of the truth, or are we in search of meaning making, of understanding, right? And how do we then again define truth? So if somebody has lived something, they have an understanding of something, and they have given meaning to that particular experience that they have, then surely it is true for them, is it not? So as a researcher, these are some of the questions that you need to be asking yourself, because you need to then be able to think about all these as you are analyzing and interpreting your data. Very, very important. So qualitative research terminology in a nutshell. When you're doing qualitative research, these are the things that you need to be thinking about. Sampling, right? Within qualitative research, we speak about purpose or purposeful sampling, non-random sampling, because you're very specific in terms of who and what you're looking for. The example that I've given, that if you're interested in unemployment and experiences of unemployment, you cannot do a random sampling. It has to be non-random because you're looking at a particular specific thing, right? And then snowball sampling. And then in terms of quality control, because there is a difference in doing research as a scholar, as an academic, as a student in an academic institution, and just doing research out of curiosity out there in the world. And that is why it's important for us to have quality control, right? Did you even conduct this research, and how do we know that you did? And the processes that you took in doing so, because we're talking also about the credibility of the work that you're doing, but the credibility also of the qualification that you're going to get. If you're going to be an expert in a particular field tomorrow, you need to have done the work. So quality control. In qualitative research, we're interested in trustworthiness, in credibility, dependability, and confirmability, interested in transferability. And then the process of doing the work, of actually conducting the research, it's emergent, as I've already indicated. There's lots and lots of processes of reflexivity, the audience, and the representation of the work that you've produced, and then rich description as well. And I will get to these in a moment. Okay, so starting with sampling. Convenient or convenience sampling or purposive sampling is the kind of sample that is simply available to the researcher by virtue of its accessibility. And often as a student, obviously you don't have a lot of money in terms of research funds to be able to just go wherever you want to do the research. So the resources that you have also oftentimes kind of determine where the research would be done. So we would do research in our own communities, we would do research in our own province or regions, or where we already have contacts. And so it's about accessibility. And then it becomes quicker as well. But it always has to be in line with the focus of your research. So it should not just be about convenience, even if maybe people do not have the kind of experience that you're hoping that they have, based on the focus of your study. And then another sampling type in qualitative research is snowball sampling. Sometimes you might know one or two people, but because of similar experiences, people might know other people who are also or who have also had a similar experience. So it's also a form of convenience sampling. You make initial contact with a person, small group of people, and then through those people you establish contacts with other people. But as I also say here, be careful of unintended homogeneity. So you also don't want to have people who are going to just tell you the same thing, because maybe it's people in the same circle, people with kind of the same focus and experience, and then the group becomes too homogeneous, right? So always think about what is it that I want to achieve. And even when you then do snowballing, you also need to be careful and say, okay, I've already spoken to 3 people here. Will these 3 people bring something different? Where are they from? Are they also women? Am I now also interested in men? So what is it that you're interested in? That should also contribute towards how the snowballing will happen, right? So it's not just snowballing for the sake of snowballing, because you also don't want unintended homogeneity. And then quality control in qualitative research. A number of qualitative researchers, in particular Cavale, questioned the appropriateness of the holy trinity of science in qualitative research. Remember, I indicated that positivist paradigm, which is aligned to and in line with quantitative research, has been the driver of research in many of our disciplines for many, many years. So qualitative research is really something that sort of came after, again, as a result of researchers asking questions, researchers saying, but doing this kind of work does not assist us to be able to also ask pertinent questions and get to understand experiences beyond just what we can observe or what we can measure. So the evolution of research, of scholarship, is something that is always fascinating, because that's how new knowledge comes about, right? So many studies were done focusing mostly on quantitative research. And even when qualitative research became popular, there was this need to want to make qualitative research, in inverted commas, legitimate by still applying the rules of quantitative research. And I'm sure you can agree that cannot work. And many scholars realize that that cannot work. Can I really measure validity in qualitative research? Can I really measure generalizability in qualitative research? And so scholars such as Cavallo said, we need to think differently about how we look at the issues of quality control in qualitative research in particular. So reliability, validity, generalizability, we need to think about them differently because the ways in which they are understood and applied in quantitative research cannot just then be taken and applied in qualitative research in the way that they are applied in quant. And as a result, he then suggested that there needs to be an establishment of thinking differently about quality control in qual research. And this can be through so what is the trustworthiness of this data? How can we trust this data? How can we trust the process? And the argument was that we can do this through checking for credibility. We can do this through checking for transferability. We can do this through checking for dependability and confirmability. And maybe when you're doing your own research, there could be something else that you can come up with that you think might be useful for us to add and to think about when we're doing qualitative research. And this is how we continuously contribute towards knowledge production. How do we establish this trustworthiness? First, with credibility. It's about prolonged engagement. So you're not going to have a 5-minute phone call interview or 5-minute interview with somebody and say that based on these 5-minute interviews, I have rich data that I can be able to analyze and make recommendations and conclusions from. So there has to be some prolonged engagement and speak to a number of people so that you hear different or diverse experiences or varied approaches or experiences that people have as it relates to a particular phenomenon. And then referential adequacy as well, right? Is the work also adequate, right? So the referencing in terms of the content, the data that you collect, is it adequate for you to be able to say, okay, this work is adequate or this work is credible? So me as the reader, me as the supervisor, can I look at the work and be able to say, okay, there is referential adequacy here. But also peer debriefing is also important to consider. Sharing your work and checking with the peers, having somebody else to also look at the work and see whether what you see is also what they see. That also speaks to credibility. And of course, member checking. If you've interviewed people, if you've engaged with communities, it's always important to go back and check whether how you have represented or how you have articulated what they shared with you is the correct representation of what they shared with you. So that also adds towards the credibility of your data. You also don't want to have work published and finalized only to have people later saying, no, but that's not what I said, or that's not what I meant. So member checking is very important. And I would really like to stress this. After you've collected your data, and you've transcribed and translated where needed, you have to make sure that you go back and check with the people that you collected the data from, whether what you have said or how you've represented them is a true reflection, and whether they are happy with the way in which you would like to represent them. I know sometimes we're very quick. We want to finalize and submit, but it's also a form of respect, and it's part of ethical consideration. And transferability, so thick description. So you have your transcripts, you have your work. Can your work be transferable to other contexts, other people who want to do similar studies? So if I'm sitting in South Africa and I've done this research, I've published on it, can someone sitting in Nigeria sit with my work and based on the work that I've produced, do a similar study in Nigeria in a different context, drawing from the work that I've done? So is your work transferable? And then dependability and confirmability, audit trail. Are the transcripts there? You said you've collected the data, but you're not submitting your transcripts to me as a supervisor. How do I know that you actually collected that data? Where is the raw data? It's very, very important. And then data reconstruction and synthesis products. So putting everything together, the audit trail, the raw data, sitting with that data, even if maybe the supervisor says, no, go back, which I've done recently with one of my students, because the data was very scanty, right? There wasn't, it was not in depth. The questions were asked and then the student just went on to the next question, went on to the next question. And when you're doing a qualitative research study, you cannot do that. So there are many things that the probing that did not happen and the follow-ups that did not happen. And so you're left also with questions. And what that can do is it's going to lead you to now make assumptions of what the person meant by what they said in the transcript that you have in front of you. And you don't want to be sitting with having to make assumptions, right? And then process notes as well. As you're interviewing, as you're engaging with your participants, we always encourage that you also take notes. So while you might be recording, but you might also be taking reflective notes as well. You're making maybe sticky notes as you're already thinking about your work. So all of that is the audit trail. So all of that, it's things that if tomorrow someone can say, but did you really conduct this research? You can put these things on the table and say, there is the proof that this work was done. Okay, so this is what is being suggested by scholars as a way to establish trustworthiness in our work. Qualitative research has got many designs. So there are quite a number of designs that are possible for you if you're interested in doing qualitative research, from grounded theory to historical work to phenomenology. Again, it's going to be determined by what is it that you are asking, what is it that you're interested in which field are you in, and what would make sense in terms of assisting you, what design would make sense in terms of assisting you to be able to answer your research question. And we start briefly with grounded theory. So the origins of grounded theory goes back to a number of scholars, and it was mostly in sociology, where colleagues such as Barney, Glaser, and Anselm Strauss were thinking about how do we come up with theory, right? And how do we do qualitative research that assists us to actually come up with a theory at the end of our work? And so theory generation, as we know, we always say which theoretical framework, which theory are you going to be using? Who are you going to be drawing from? Theory generation is grounded in data. So you do research, you conduct research, you ask questions, you do the work, and based on the work that you've done, your analysis, your interpretation, you then come up with a theory saying, okay, so actually this issue of unemployment is linked to 1, 2, and 3. So the notion of unemployment is actually an issue that is 1, 2, 3, right? So you then generate a particular theory of unemployment. If we want to understand unemployment, these are some of the things that we need to keep in mind. These are some of the things that we need to consider. And this would be what you have come up with. And so tomorrow we'll be saying Khumalo's theory of unemployment tells us that if we're thinking about understanding unemployment within a particular frame or context, or in this way, or within the psychological influences of it, or the legal implications of it, or the economic aspects of it, depending on, again, the discipline that you're in, this theory of unemployment tells us 1, 2, and 3. And this happens or can happen based on the research that you would have conducted. So, and this is specifically, this can happen even with all the other different types of research, but this grounded research or grounded theory specifically is about theory generation. So it's grounded in data versus the verification or development through logical deduction, which is what you often get with many of the theories that we have. It's about thinking, critiquing, analyzing, engaging with phenomena, and then based on that, you come to a logical conclusion that, okay, A leads to B. And if it leads to B, therefore then B will lead to C. And therefore, that is then the theory of understanding this phenomena, right? But with grounded theory, it's grounded in the data. So it's through this data and engaging and analyzing this data that you come up with a particular theory on the phenomena that you're looking at. So the application of this, you need a broad theory or explanation of a process when you're doing research. Current theories about a phenomenon are either inadequate or non-existent. So many people have written about unemployment. They describe it, they define it, they engage with it. And here you come, you're interested in going further than what these other scholars have contemplated and have written about. So because there's this gap, something missing, and you're saying, no, what we currently have is inadequate. So I'm adding to this and I'm coming up with a new way in which we can think about the idea of unemployment. And that's how you can come up with a theory. There could be other theories that exist, or there could not be a theory. Maybe there's no theory on unemployment, right? You can go and do that work and check whether there is. Maybe there is no theory of unemployment and you're interested in something like that. So your work can actually lead to the development of a theory of unemployment. Okay. And so the process of doing this work when you're doing research is that there's constant comparative analysis. And grounded theory capitalizes on a way we naturally think. So, you know, when you are doing something or you're engaging with somebody, you are always or naturally thinking about how to make meaning of this engagement that you're having. So you want to think early about interpretation and theory. Often when we do research, you conduct the data. When you're done, you sit with the data, you start thinking about coding, and you start thinking about coming up with themes, and then based on that, make meaning of the data, interpret what are the findings and what do we do with this. But with grounded theory, all of that work happens simultaneously. So as you're collecting data, you're already thinking about interpretation. You're already thinking, oh, this is what's coming up for me. Already from this interview, okay, this is what I'm picking up, okay. And then when you go to the second interview, from that interview, you're already again seeing what's coming up, linking that to the first one, okay. And then you continue to that. So you are thinking already about interpretation and theory. So grounded theory is believed to be a disciplined way of doing this. So what grounded theory method does is that it consists of simultaneous data collection, as I said, and analysis. So everything is happening concurrently, with each one informing and focusing the other throughout the research process. So as you analyze, already things are coming up for you. Questions are also could be coming up for you. And based on those questions that are coming up for you, that will also inform your subsequent interviews as well. Okay, so that's how grounded theory works. What grounded theorists do is often they would ignore existing theory. So when we say we need the theory that drives your research, the lens that you're using for your research, when you're doing grounded theory, your work will not necessarily be driven by a particular theory, because the theory then informs and directs how you're going to do research. But if you're interested in actually the work from the ground up, and that the data also forms the theory that you want to come up with, then existing theory will not necessarily be useful for you. So it's suggested that you ignore existing theory. Little to no literature exists on this phenomena. So you're actually doing something that perhaps hasn't been done by many people. Not a lot of that exists. I'm waiting for someone to say this hasn't been done before. So collect, code, and analyze concurrently if you're interested in grounded theory, and inductive methods. So as I said, it's the bottom-up reasoning, moving from the specific to the general. So based on these experiences and interviews and engagements, you're looking at specific things and specific experiences. And then based on that, you move to creating a general theory of a phenomena of unemployment. And then it's systematic and very exhaustive comparison of text segments. So you don't just have excerpts for the sake of having excerpt, but you really sit with your data and you do a comparison, and very exhaustively in this kind of research. So it's quite time consuming. And then you build thematic structure and theory as you go along. Okay. So there has been some criticism looking at grounded theory. Some scholars, such as Thomas and James, have argued that it's impossible to free yourself from preconceptions in the collection and analysis of data in the way that Glaser and Strauss say is necessary. So Strauss and Glaser speak about grounded theory, and they say that everything comes as you are doing the work, and you are informed and directed by this work. However, other scholars, such as these ones, saying you cannot really free yourself from the preconceptions that are there as you collect the data. And if already from interview one, moving to the next, you're already engaging with the data, you're going to have some expectations or preconceptions as you move to the next, if you've already started analyzing. And then they caution against that and say these are things to keep in mind and to think about if you're interested in doing grounded theory. And then quickly, ethnography. Ethnography is taken to refer to writing about people. So ethno as in ethnic, ethnicity, and then graphy, writing. So it's a study in which participant observation is the prevalent research method. So if you're interested in participant observation, then ethnography would be for you. Interested in the culture of a group, culture of a people, that you as the researcher, as the ethnographer, would be immersed in. So some of the disciplines that have really used ethnography are sociology and anthropology, mostly anthropology. And here you're interested in the shared culture of a particular group over time. And most of the time you would be focusing on a single site. right? So it's almost as if it's like a case study. So you're looking at a single site over time. You participate or you observe, depending on what it is that you're interested in or interested in understanding. So you engage in field work, and then you describe the setting wherein you're doing your work. And as part of that, because often you are immersed in the community itself, it also involves a lot of reflexivity. And this is just an example of how one can think about it. So at the marketplace, looking at the marketplace and the culture of the marketplace, how people engage, move about, who goes to the market, what are some of the interactions, what are the things that happen at the market? City life, what are some of the challenges of city lives? What are some of the possibilities of city life? What does it mean to have a city life or to live in the city? Okay, so these are just some of the examples that one could think about when you're thinking about ethnography. And there you see also an example of people in a club. So club life and clubbing, and understanding that. So you observe, or you also go to clubs and you observe people in a club, you participate in the activities that happen in the club, or you just sit and observe what happens. So various ways in which one could be an ethnographer, various ways in which you can do ethnographic work. First, you can be a complete participant, where you are a fully functioning member of that social setting that you've chosen. In your true and your true identity is not known to members. So here we're saying you're like an undercover, right? You're an undercover researcher. So you are a covert observer. Your identity is not known. So you go, you join a social setting. You saw here some examples. So there's people doing graffiti. Maybe it's something that you're fascinated about and interested in, and you have some skills. So then you join a graffiti club, attend the meetings, and engage in the various activities that graffiti artists get involved in. And the artists do not know that you are actually not there only as a graffiti artist, but you're actually doing research on the whole process, right? And then participant as observer. The role is the same as the previous one, but here people are aware that you are a researcher. So you indicated you're not an undercover. You come in and you explain your role, and then they welcome you. They allow you to participate in their activities, but also understanding that you are there as an outsider, as a researcher, but then they allow you to participate in their activities. And then the third one, observer as participant. So you're there as just an observer. So you go to that club and you observe people dancing on poles, people drinking, people doing all various type of things that people do in clubs. And maybe you're just interested in club life and what happens in clubs, or drugs and how clubbing is linked to drugs, for example, or alcohol consumption within the club space, whatever it is that would make one want to do research in clubs. So there is some observation, but very little of it involves any participation, right? So you might go maybe buy a drink while you are at the club, but you don't fully participate in the activities that happen in a nightclub. And then the complete observer is where you don't interact with people, you just observe. So if you're interested in graffiti, for example, you just observe. How many times do they go and do graffiti on walls? Is it over weekends? Is it during the week? Is it once a week? And what is involved, and how many people often do it at a time? Is it just one artist? Do they share? So you observe and you note your observations so that you can be able to make meaning of what is involved in the whole graffiti world, or graffiti scene, so that you can be able to write about it and engage on it. So those are the various roles that one could take on as a researcher doing ethnography work. Okay, and here is an example of an ethnographic study and a research question that one would ask when doing an ethnographic study. What are the underlying beliefs and traditions of an all-boys school? So this is just an example of a research question that one would ask. If you go to a boys' school, maybe you go there and you, as a researcher, depending your age group as well, you can go and maybe pretend to be a student, or you go and observe, get permission from the school, maybe be one of the teachers if you go there as an undercover, or you ask for permission to spend time at the school to really get a sense and understanding of what happens in an all-boys school. Obviously, you're not going to be there for 1 day or 2 days, because you're also interested in the underlying beliefs that are there. So you want to spend time and get an understanding of the various traditions that are there in an all-boys school. Action research. Action research is a systematic inquiry of a particular proactive process with the aim to improve something. So if you're, again, interested in issues of unemployment in a particular community, you might want to then maybe conduct an action research looking at the possibility of coming up with a program that can assist in alleviating the challenges of unemployment, where maybe the youth could be employed and be part of that program with the aim of improving the livelihoods of people in a particular community. So often as action researchers, the end product is that there has to be something that comes from this research that is going to practically improve the lives or the situation within that particular place where you're going to be doing the research. So hence this idea of action. So there is action that is going to be taking place. So it could be for empowerment, it could be for emancipation, where people are taught something. It could be for transformation, right? And this kind of research is practical, as I've already indicated, and it is participatory. So obviously, if you're going to be involved in a project of ensuring that there are some skills that are imparted, and maybe you're working in collaboration with the community itself or other stakeholders, those that are to get the skills would then participate so that they're able to get the skill. So it is participatory in nature, and is characterized by collaboration, as I said, between the researcher and participants and maybe other stakeholders within the community. Reflection. In many of the qualitative research designs, there's a lot of reflection that occurs, that happens along the way. And you come up with a clear plan of action to respond to the issue or the problem. And it's very cyclical, right? So it's not beginning here and ending there. It's also about sustainability. So it's cyclical in that it keeps going and going and going and going, ideally to end poverty. And this is the cycle. This is just an example of what I've just explained right now, so I won't dwell on it. And then phenomenology. Now, phenomenology is about, again, understanding a particular phenomenon and the experience of that phenomenon, experience of a particular reality as constructed and understood by people. So it's about reality versus our experience of reality. And this image captures that beautifully. As you see with the two hands, so what you see and the perception of what's there are two different things, right? Is it just two hands put together and then a silhouette of those two hands, or is the other one a rabbit? So what is the experience of reality? What is it that you see? And what does what you see mean to you? right? It's about the structure of consciousness as experience from the first person point of view. Again, it's about our experience of reality and how we understand it. It's about individual experiences, the beliefs that people have, and perceptions that people have about a particular issue. So what are their thoughts? What is it that they think and understand about a particular issue? And the memory, also looking back, looking at the history, and depending on what kind of work one does. So I'm in psychology and interested in work around trauma, right? So it's again about memory. It's about remembering the traumatic event. It's about remembering the traumatic past, and how does one make meaning of that? How does one move forward and being able to manage and deal with the traumatic experience or event that they've experienced in their lives. So what the memories linked to the particular event that person has. So it's about those experiences, right? And the beliefs around the experiences that people have. It's about imagination. Those who are in the arts, when you think about imagination, creativity, innovation, but it's also about emotions, right? Individual experiences and the emotions that are reflected in one having to sit for a year without a job and what that means. So what kind of emotion does that bring up for people? Right. And then the desire, again, thinking about what's possible, thinking about the future, thinking about hope, what people hope for. So this is what, again, the idea of phenomenology and understanding how people make meaning of various phenomena in their lives is about, right? And volition to bodily awareness as well, that the person is always part of the experience that are happening to them at any particular moment, whether in the past or in the present. And all of this I often used, or the meaning is made through text, right? So text is used as a proxy for human experience. So you have interviews with people, you engage with people, you record, and then you take that text, and then you then interpret, analyze, create, and find meaning based on the text, right? To make meaning of the thinking processes, or make meaning of what people think about a particular phenomena. So the text therefore becomes what we use to be able to speak about human experience, right? But we know that it can go beyond text, for example. So in some of the work that I use, that I do, I also use artistic expression. So how can we use the arts also as a proxy for human experience? How we express ourselves through the arts also speaks to emotion, it speaks to imagination, it speaks to memory, it speaks to desire. So the intentionality and central structure of experience around these issues, and then also the bracketing, the researcher becoming separated from the text. We know that when you're doing research, in qualitative research, subjectivity is also at the core. But you also need to be able to make meaning and interpret the data that is put in front of you, so that you can be able to come up with conclusions and recommendations and things for us to take forward based on the work that you've done. Okay. And an example here, again, when you're thinking about what kind of research question can one ask if you're interested in this kind of research. So one could ask, what are the experiences of Black teachers working in former white schools? Right? So one at face value, can think of, okay, we know based on our history in South Africa in particular, former white schools have got resources, have got better resources. So that might make life easier for teachers in terms of teaching where you don't have to struggle with the resources that are necessary for teaching to happen. So one from the outside can assume that, okay, it must be wonderful working in an institution where all the resources are in place, where there is structure, where there is order, where everything seems to be in place. And therefore, the assumption might be the experience is good, right? But it's important to also think about the lived experiences. It's also important to think about the underlying systematic, often invisible aspects of working in such an environment, for example, and what are the implications of those in how the Black teachers in particular experience working in these kinds of environments, okay? And this is why research is so important. And this is why asking the right questions are also so important, because when you ask the right question, or if your research question is clear, not the right question, bad choice of words, it allows you to be able to get a deeper understanding of the phenomena. The phenomena here is the experiences of these Black teachers and the experiences as it relates to former white schools. So already there, again, the work is going to be shaped by history, right? So we're talking former white schools. So what are some of the things already coming up for you as you look at this question that's sitting here? So there's history, also thinking about the historical context and how that informs the present, and thinking about the history of the country, but also thinking about the social context, complexities of South Africa, and how those can play out in such spaces. So what are the experiences of Black teachers? And having these questions will also assist you in carving the specific questions that you would ask in an interview. Okay, and then quickly, the historical research. Those who are in history, for example, would know if you're conducting this kind of research, it's what one would be interested in. You're interested in describing and examining events of the past, right? Yeah, the purpose is to understand the present and anticipate potential future effects as well. So what is it that the past is teaching us? What is it that we can learn from history so that we hopefully don't repeat some of the mistakes of the past, or we can avoid some of the things that happened in the past that might likely happen again. So understanding these can assist us to be able to anticipate the future. And so how does one go about doing this kind of work? So you develop an inventory of sources. So you go to the archives, private libraries, you look at papers that have been written on that particular phenomena. How many of us knew about 1918 when COVID happened? The Spanish flu that now was in our consciousness that we were now talking about. So how does history inform how we see or view the world today, right? And the method is that when you've looked at the archives, libraries, the papers, you also need to be thinking about the validity and reliability of the data. Who wrote? Who are the sources? Can they be verified? Authenticity, the biases that are there. We know some of the distorted histories that are currently with us. So going back is also looking at trying to rewrite the wrongs of history, or some of the things that were distorted by those who had the power to be able to write history. So what are some of the biases that exist, and how is your work challenging, critiquing, and questioning these, and assisting us to be able to rethink what we've understood history to be? So you synthesize in your analysis, you accept or you reject the data, obviously justifying your arguments and also justifying why you're rejecting the data. And then you also reconcile conflicting evidence. What evidence exists? And is this evidence aligned with each other, or is it conflicting? Maybe as you go to the archives, you find something else. When you go to private libraries, or when you go to different archives in other countries, you're finding something else. So how do you work with all of that in your analysis so that you can be able to synthesize and say, these are the results that I've come up with, and this is the conclusion or conclusions that I've come up with based on my research? Okay, and then case study. Case study again, here you're exploring a bounded system. And it could be a single case, or it could be multiple cases. And a bounded system is something that is bounded either by time or by context. So it's confined to a particular context or moment in time. And you're interested in this particular case because there's maybe something peculiar, something interesting, something unique about that particular system or case that you want to get an understanding of, so that we can be able, hopefully, to learn something from it, right? So it's detailed, in-depth data collection involving multiple sources of information here as well. So as I said, you focus on one phenomenon, and it can be a specific instance, and you're looking at commonalities, or you're looking at something that's unique about this case. So what is it about this case? What is it about this? And it can be a group of people, it could be a particular person, or it can be an entity. So a university, a school, a classroom, a church, what is it about that entity that is fascinating for you to want to do research on? Okay. And the context also is real life. So in a school, what is it that's happening there? In that classroom, what is it that's happening there? So, and it can be something that's physical, something that's historical, or it could be an economic setting. What is it that we can learn about how other countries that were very poor managed to shift things around, and now they are competing with the so-called first world classes? You look at China, for example, what is it that happened that, you know, made other countries change their trajectory? So you could be looking at a particular phenomenon. And as I said, it's something very particular that you would be looking at. And it's about wanting to understand a phenomena or come up with a discovery of that aha moment. Oh, so this is what's happening, or what happened. This is what they did. Their children, their schooling system changed, and as a result, they put 1, 2, and 3 things in place, and that is why over a period of 30 or 50 years, the economy of that particular country shifted. So what is it about that particular case that interests you, right? And the complexities of it. And here's a quick example. And the example here is, why do some township schools achieve high academic results despite sharing the same resource challenges as others? I'm sure you've heard once in a while, we'll hear that, oh, here's the school that's based in this community, in this particular part of the country, and this school has achieved 100% pass rate. And if you look at that school, you can notice that they've got shortage of teachers, they don't have resources, they've got challenges 1, 2, and 3. And we know in many other schools that often leads or contributes to the failure rate or lower achievement in schools. But here is this one school or here are these few schools that you're looking at. So a case study of these 3 schools that achieve high results. And so your study is looking at these cases and saying, what is it that these schools are doing that has contributed to them receiving high academic results? And with your study, we can get to an understanding, or we can get to knowledge about what is it that can be put in place. Maybe what they're doing can be replicated in other schools. Maybe what they're doing can actually contribute towards other schools if it was also implemented there. What is it that's happening in those schools that's making them achieve high results? So your study looks at that. You look at it over a period of time. You study, you understand, you look at the things that they've put in place, and then based on that, you do your analysis. And then based on your analysis, you come up with recommendations of what is it that other schools can also consider doing or putting in place in order to possibly and hopefully change their trajectory as well, where they can also start having high academic results. Okay, and then data collection. Now that you've done your sampling, now that you've decided on your research design, and then you collect your data. And in qualitative research, there are different ways in which one can collect data. One of them is through interviews. And interviews also happen in different ways. So there's structured interviews, semi-structured, and unstructured. Structured is when you have a rigid interview style that you follow. You've got 20 questions, and these are the 20 questions that you're going to be asking your participants. Semi-structured interviews, you have some questions, but you also open yourself to probing. So you might have 5 questions that are your leading questions, and then based on those questions and based on the responses that are given to you by your participants, you ask further questions building on the answers that they would have given you. Okay. And then unstructured, as it says, there is no interview schedule. It's open-ended. You might just have a probe, one probe. If maybe you're interested in oral histories, for example, you're interested in ethnography or autoethnography, someone's life course or narrative, you can have 1 or just 2 questions. So a broad question that will allow for the participant to tell you a long narrative, right? And then based on that narrative, you have a conversation with the person that you're interviewing. So often students would not go for the unstructured one because it's not that easy, because what if that person does not say much? What do you then do, right? So, but it's also a useful way that you can use if you don't want the person to be guided by the predetermined questions that you're already coming up with. Okay, so structuring your interview guide, you don't just decide, oh, what questions can I ask? Remember, again, the questions have to be in line with your broad research questions, because these questions on your interview are meant to answer that research question that you have, are meant to assist you to achieve your objectives, right? So read the literature before developing your guide. What specific information do you want to get from this interview? Ask yourself these questions. It's very, very important. Using open questions will assist you to get a more detailed answer. So trying to avoid yes or no questions would be good for you, because then you'll have thick descriptions that we spoke about earlier for you to be able to analyze. And don't use leading questions. Do not lead your participants in a particular direction. Okay. And the first set of questions must be broad. So don't be too specific too quickly. Often it's easier to just, focus on the person first, so the biographic data and all of that. And then a broad question about someone's understanding of unemployment, or what do they know about unemployment, or the meaning of unemployment. So something very broad. And then you can go to the specific question. The middle question is where now you pursue the ideas in depth, right? So guided by the broad question or questions that you asked initially. And here you can use the probe, so your interview guide becomes very useful. Don't be cold. You want your interviewee to freely engage with you. So be warm, be welcoming. And this also speaks to the way in which you're sitting with the person. This is, of course, for face-to-face interview. When it's online or it's face-to-face, it's very difficult, right? But don't be cold. Remember the purpose of the interview. You're interested in this person's lived experience. You're interested in their perception, what they have to offer, right? As I said, facts first. The name, their age, their education, all of those, if they are pertinent to your research, these are the things that you'll start with. So easier things that will make a person feel at ease before you start asking the other questions that may want people to really think first. Ask about the present before the past or the future. So where is the person right now in this moment? Cover essential issues towards the beginning, because you also, don't want the person to suffer fatigue after 40 minutes if your interview is about an hour. By the time it's 50 minutes, only now you're getting to the heart of things. No, you don't want to do that. The last questions might be to allow your respondents to provide any other information they prefer to add, maybe that you might not have asked, that they might want to share with you. Okay. And then preparation is very, very important. You don't want to seem disorganized as you're sitting with your interview. Make sure that you have enough battery life. If the interview is going to take long, make sure that your battery is full on your recorder or on your phone, whatever gadget you're going to be using, because you don't want the battery to now die in the middle of the interview, and then it's quite an embarrassment for you, but it also looks like you did not prepare very well. Be presentable as well. Think about appearances. It's also very much linked to respect for the person or people that you're going to be engaging with, right? Be considerate of the gender, the culture, and social differences. Who is it that you're going to be interviewing, right? Do you understand their culture? And so do you understand the cultural etiquette as you're doing the work? Find a comfortable place for interviewing, avoid places that are noisy, where there can be disruptions, and consider control issues in the interview as well. Allow for a free flow of engagement and conversation, explaining what needs to happen, and then the informed consent, also very important, where you explain and people understand all the ethical consideration and why you have invited them for this interview. So what are the characteristics of a good interview? You are clear about why you're doing this, and you tolerate pauses. So don't be uncomfortable when there is silence between you and the person that you're interviewing. And don't use jargon. We come from various disciplines and different fields, and there are certain words, phrases, jargon that we use in our discipline. Remember, with your interviews, your interview schedule, what you're going to be engaging with the person with, it has to be something that we often say a grade 8 learner would be able to understand. So look at it. Maybe if you do have children or grade 8 learners or thereabout in the house, maybe practice with them, check that they understand the questions, whether they can make meaning of it. So that will help you as well. Okay. Inform the person how the process is going to go so that you don't, there are no surprises. As I said, comments and questions. and use questions as prompts, right? So treat your interviews as a conversation, and the questions that you have are prompts for the conversation to continue. Look at the body language. People speak in words, but also people speak in nonverbal ways as well. And you steer the conversation, because remember, what you would like is also still in line with answering your research questions. If there are contradictions or challenges, speak about those. Speak about those. Do not just go and then in your interpretation and you say, no, the person was contradicting themselves. You could see there was uncertainties and this. Now you're making value judgment after the fact. So if that happens while you're busy with the interview, have a conversation about it. No, but earlier you said this, and so now I was wondering, because now you're saying this, whether maybe that. So look at ways in which to bring things together in a way that assists you to understand, but also the person that you're interviewing. For many people, interviews can be nerve-wracking, so it can happen that, you know, a person can lose themselves in that moment. Summarize and interpret. Am I hearing you correctly? Is this what you're saying? Don't talk too little, don't talk too much. And as I've said again, with the gender and the culture and all of those, be ethically sensitive. The wording of your questions. Follow up, clarify. Don't interrupt while a person is in the middle of a sentence. And be careful to ask the why questions, only when it's necessary, because sometimes the why question can come across as being judgmental, right? And it can make a person, it can silence people. Don't debate responses. If that's how the person views and sees things, it might not be aligned to the way that you see things. Remember, it's not about you. Okay? And here are just some of the prompts that you can use. I don't quite understand. I'm still confused. You said this, and I was just wondering. Can you tell me more? You've just said this. Can you tell me more? What do you mean when you say this and that, right? So repeating a word or a phrase also shows that I'm listening to you. I'm hearing what you're saying. Okay, I'm looking at the time. I also want to give us time for questions, because I'm also interested in your own comments as well after this lecture. So I'm just going to quickly go through the last slides. Capturing the interview, I've already indicated audio recording with permission. Check your transcriptions after, and if you can and want, you can also take notes as well. Field notes are very important. Ensure that synonyms are used. You check with the participants first whether they would like to have their own names used or not. Again, with the research designs, often when you're doing participatory action research or action research, those who are collaborators and co-creators in the process of research would like to have their names used in the research. So it's also very important to not just assume that you're going to use synonyms and make people invisible. Always check what people prefer. Okay. And then focus groups. I've already alluded to focus groups earlier. Focus groups are not just another interview with a group of people. You do a focus group because you want to achieve something specific, right? You're also interested in the group dynamics, right? It's interactive. You're also looking at how people speak about a particular issue, how they agree and disagree. What is it that's coming up from the group performance as well in dynamics. And it's about the group, not individuals. Hence, we say it's not just another interview where you're also looking at what the individual people are saying, but you're also looking at what is it that's coming out from what people are saying in the group. Right? So you do focus groups because you're interested in a variety of opinions. You're interested in the depth of information that comes from that particular space. You're also interested in exploring a particular issue, interested in perceptions that people have, but also group dynamics as well. What is it that happens when people are sitting together talking about a particular issue they agree and disagree on? And then with focus groups, because it also needs to be manageable, you're looking at about 6 to 10 people at the most. You don't want it to be too small. People feel exposed. You also don't want it to be too big, because then some people can hide and disappear in a big group, okay? And you need to also look at the balance in the focus group. Are you looking at strangers? Are you looking at acquaintances? What do you want to achieve? Are you looking at different races, different age groups, different genders? And why is that the case? So these are the questions that you need to ask yourself if you're saying you want to do a focus group data collection. Okay, so you're looking at about 8 questions or fewer, because with one questions, there could be a lot of debates and discussions among people. So a lot of contributions can come from one question. So have key questions that you know you want to ask, and others can be follow-up questions as well. There are a lot of dynamics that you also need to think about. And how do you also read the group? You observe also, again, with the body language and how people are talking as well. Don't lead. Don't give too many examples. Allow people to give meaning and understanding for themselves. Okay. I'm looking at the time, and I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop here. As I indicated, that we're going to continue with part 2 tomorrow. And I think left with only a few slides, and with where we are right now, what I'll do is I'll start from there tomorrow, because there's still a few things that I would like us to cover for tomorrow. So we will cover the rest tomorrow, because I want to also give you time to have questions and to have those questions answered as well. Okay, so I'm going to go now to the Q&A, and hoping that you have some comments or some questions that you might want to pose at this point. Okay. All right, and my colleagues can also assist me. I'm not seeing any questions. I think it's still loading, so just give a moment there. Okay, Yidachu Anato is asking, what is the ideal sample size in qualitative research? This is a very debatable question, because if you go and check in literature, many scholars have varying views around how many people one needs to have when it comes to qualitative research. But what we always suggest is that you need to think about saturation phase, right? So when does one reach saturation phase? So the ideal number that we often have is between 8 and 10 participants, right? But it can go to 20 participants. We've had students or people, or even us as researchers, you can interview 50 people even. And sometimes people go on to interview even more than that, 70 people. You need to be guided by the process itself. So when you're doing your proposal, you'll indicate that you will interview until you reach saturation phase. But ideally, you will have a minimum of 10 people that you're going to be interviewing. You might find that after the 6th interview or the 8th interview, you start hearing the same thing. So that example that I used earlier on unemployment. So maybe you're asking people about the experiences of being unemployed. And then you find that, okay, now I'm interviewing person number 7. And the majority of what this person is saying is what the other 6 people that I've interviewed have said as well. So already that starts giving you an idea that, okay, I might be reaching saturation phase. So you can still continue and interview the 3 more if you had said you want to interview 10 people and now you've interviewed 7 people, but then you can continue and interview the rest. But you already know that, okay, there's already a trend that I'm seeing in terms of what themes are coming up, what I'm hearing people say. So this is a long answer, but again, if you're doing your master's or your PhD, and again, with the time, if you're going to interview 50 people, it might take you quite a number of years to complete your study, because when you interview 50 people, remember we said your data has to be rich. And we want thick descriptions of what people are saying. And if you're going to be interviewing people for at least 1 hour each, and you're interviewing 50 people, that's going to take you a very long time to also code and interpret the data. So you also need to think about that as well. So for your master's and your PhD, 10 people for your master's is acceptable. 20 people for your PhD is also acceptable. But also check with your supervisor, because there's also the preference when it comes to individual supervisors, because I could have read such and such a scholar who said, no, 5 to 10 people are fine. Maybe your supervisor has read another paper by another scholar who said, no, 20 people, otherwise it's not enough. So also check with your supervisor in terms of what would be acceptable for your supervisor, also based on the focus of your study, what your topic is as well. Is it easy to get participants in that area, in that field, or is it not easy? What is the focus of your study? So that's also important to think about. Okay. All right, I hope that answered your question. Sure, Anonymous, I'm not sure I understand. You're mentioning, okay, is it fitting to utilize historical research or critical emancipatory paradigm with action research for transformational purposes, but also applying the feminist theory? Oh, okay, I see. Yes, Anonymous, definitely. Because all of these are connected. Remember, with feminist theory, you're interested in transformation, questioning, critiquing the idea of how society is structured, about inequities, about injustices, right? More broadly. And so what your work is doing is thinking about what is it that we can do to transform, to reshape society, or to reshape a context in a way that's going to lead to emancipation, right? That's going to lead to people thinking differently, people being empowered, people being emancipated. And that can also involve action research, or what we call also participatory action research, where people that you're working with, because if you're thinking about emancipation, if you're thinking about transformation, the full participation of your participants have to be at the core and at the center of the work that you're doing. And with feminist theory, participation is very, very important, because the idea is that you should not speak for. You should not speak for people, but you should provide a platform and an opportunity for people to be able to speak for themselves, because that is how transformation happens. But also people know what they need, and people need to know what needs to be in place for change to happen. So providing space and opportunity for that to happen would be part of feminist theory or feminist research. Okay. All right, Esther, linking the interview guide to the research question. So you start with the research question because that's what you have first. Remember, you look at the focus of your study, the topic, your research problem, and then your objectives. So now that I've identified a gap, I've identified a problem, what is it specifically that I want to achieve, right? And what are my objectives? And then based on these objectives, what are the questions that I need to ask to be able to achieve these objectives? And these questions are your broad questions, right? What are the challenges linked to unemployment? What are the gendered issues linked to unemployment, for example? So these would be your broad research questions. Now, based on these questions, you would have done your literature review. What is literature saying on this issue? What studies have been done, and what are the gaps? Because remember, those gaps have led you to a research question, but also those gaps are also going to lead you to think about specific questions that you need to ask on the research, the interview guide, the specific questions that you're going to be asking your participants. So be guided. How you make the link is that you need to be guided by the research question, that broad question. What are the specific questions that I can ask people that can lead me to answer that questions? So if it's saying the gendered perspectives around unemployment, your questions would then be linked to looking at the roles that would be linked to women's experiences with unemployment. What are the challenges? What are some of the issues that women particularly face? And what are some of the things that are hindrances that lead to maybe women experiencing higher unemployment? And how do we define that unemployment? So that broad research question, you look at that and then you break it down, right? If you have a good research question, it's going to be easier for you to have good interview questions that you're going to be asking your participants. All right. Okay, how does a researcher really delineate between phenomenology and case study research? That is, can case study research be done exceptionally well without necessarily drawing from phenomenology? Okay, so, and sets, this is the beauty of qualitative research, right? You remember the example that I gave of a case study where, which example did I give again? Of schools, right? So of schools that are performing well, and how these schools can be used as case studies for us to understand what is it that we can do differently in other schools as well. So that is a case study. But within that case study, so the schools and what's happening in the schools is a case study. But within that case study, you're interested in a particular phenomenon. You're interested in the reality of these schools. You're interested in what is it that's happening in those spaces that's leading to these results that they're getting. Can research be done exceptionally well without drawing from phenomenology? Yes, it can, but you can also do research and draw from phenomenology. And when you draw from phenomenology, it enriches your research, and it also enriches the study, the case that you are looking at, that you are studying. Okay. I hope that's clear. How do you constitute focus groups to avoid dynamics of power, experts, and novice participants? You need to look at a balance, right? I spoke about thinking of between 6 to 10 people. So there has to be a balance because you are interested in hearing different views and different perspectives on a particular issue. So you as the researcher, you're going to be mediating, right? So the idea is not to avoid those power dynamics or having experts in a focus group, because to enrich the conversations, you need to have that mix. There has to be a mix of voices and a mix of expertise as well, because at the same time people are learning from each other as much as you as the researcher, Mpho, are also learning from the people in the room as well. So you don't necessarily want to avoid the dynamics in the constituting of the groups, but you need to be able to manage the dynamics in the focus group discussion or engagement itself. Okay, so you want to have novices and you want to have experts, and you need to be able to mediate in a way that ensures that there is power balance in the group that that you are encountering or that you're dealing with. Okay. Okay, that's just load shedding on my side. Can the pauses have meaning as well, especially if you are doing gender study? Can it be something that one can consider using during analysis? Definitely, Noni. The pauses have meaning. The reason why we said you must also take note of the body language. Body language is also language. It also speaks. So what is it that happens when you ask a particular question? Does a person start fidgeting? Do they start, withdrawing a bit? Or is that the moment when the pause happens? So those moments in data collection are very, very important as well. So you're not just focusing on the text, on the spoken, but you're also interested in that which is not spoken. The pauses definitely have meaning. And as a researcher, you need to reflect on those as you are doing your analysis. So you are definitely spot on, Noni. Okay. Kazim, the concept of saturation simply means when you get to a point where there is no longer new data or information that you're getting from your participants anymore. Because remember here, it's very iterative. It's the data or what you get is dependent on what people give to you. So in an interview, you are talking to participant number one, and participant number one says, we are suffering from unemployment because of nepotism in many of the companies. People only hire their relatives, but also there's a lot of corruption, and that is why those of us who don't know people cannot get any jobs, right? Participant number two says something similar, right? They might not say it exactly the same way, but that's what they're saying as well. And then you go to participant three, they're also saying similar things, saying in many companies, what you'll find that the uncle will hire their niece, or they will hire their daughter. And that's why those of us who don't have people in these companies don't get jobs. So when you get to a point in your research where there is that kind of repetition, where there isn't anything new that's coming up, where someone will come and give a different reason for why this phenomena is happening, or a different reason for their experience, then that is a sign. Then you know that, okay, I have reached or I'm reaching saturation. So that's what saturation means in qualitative sampling, is when there is no new information coming from participants anymore. When you get to that stage, there is really no need for you to continue interviewing more people or recruiting more people, because you are seeing or realizing that this is what is at the core of what people are experiencing. Okay. Okay, I realize that we're running out of time, so I think I'm going to stop here. Waldo was asking on the process of data triangulation. Again, here, Waldo, you do data triangulation again by doing member checking, by getting somebody else to look at your analysis. You do data triangulation also by doing data or collecting data and analyzing data using different ways or different methods. But I'll also come back to the issue of data triangulation tomorrow and explain it in detail. I'm just weary of time. I hope you'll be in tomorrow's session. I'll also speak to it then as well. Okay, I think we will stop here for today. Thank you very much for coming through, and thank you very much for your questions as well. I look forward to having all of you in tomorrow's session also. Thank you very much and have a good night.